The topic of today's Dharma talk was suggested by my friend and student up in Traverse City, Jill, who is an acupuncturist. The topic is comfortable with nothing. And you might have to know Jill to know why she would ask that. Someone who sticks people with needles to help them. So that's there's a lot of directions we could go with that. And in order to really address probably what she is referring to, I might have to ask her more questions about it. But I'll do my best. And if she is, I don't know if she's on watching or not. She's picking up her son in Chicago. First of all, the whole idea of comfort is an interesting one. We're always kind of trying to make ourselves comfortable in some way. We put up with discomfort if we know there's kind of a payoff somewhere. We go to college, go to school, submit ourselves to various kinds of rigor, discipline, studying and so on. We work out maybe because we want to be in better shape. So we work with that. And in meditation practice, it's pretty challenging because if you are doing this in a way that I teach anyway, I don't know if it's the correct way particularly, but it's based on my understanding, you'll have a whole lot of nothing to work with because the dynamic that's functioning here is not particularly about a noticeable gaining idea where you're filling something up with your understanding, your grasping of various things, even concepts and so on, are not particularly helpful in many cases, depending on, and this is a very important part, depending on the particular karma, I don't know of any other word to use, causes and conditions, your own style of being a person. I'm sure you've noticed out of any, your whatever 50, 100 friends that you have or associates or family members and so on, they're hardly are two alike anywhere. The wiring or the dynamics of each person are completely unique. Even glancing at someone from a distance in a crowd of people, you recognize them. They're that specific. At the same time, they are completely submerged in being human beings. There's billions of us. I don't know how anybody can know that without counting them. Numbers are quite bothersome, aren't they? Unless you're Bailey. Bailey likes numbers. She's not here. She's in Traverse City. Well, unless you're an adept at that list, that you handle it really well and can make them do things for you. So comfortable is something to be examined. What is comfortable? What is the fundamental, what is that about, that whole idea of comfort? In the Buddhist tradition, we say that pain and pleasure are not separate. Of course, they're separated, but it's the same nerve ending. As I've used this example many times, I'll use it again. The nerve ending that picks up this movement of this. What do they call this? Kotsu. Thanks. It moves this. It's soft. It's even maybe pleasing. But if I hit it, or if I scrape it back and forth like that, it's unpleasant. Same nerve ending. So it's an interesting area that the way this works. This probably shows up in all the whole sensorium, the whole matrix of senses, feelings, consciousness operating through all these different ways, hearing, smelling, tasting. We all know that it's the same as it said in the sutra, this third one that we chanted today, the Sandokai, the equality of sameness and difference. that particular way of talking about it was saying the salt and we taste the salt and the sour. We taste contrast between things, and then we name them. And that naming, that conceptualization, that applying something to the what comes through the sense field, it's this, it's that. That actually separates us from the visceral or tactile, you could say, or the immediacy or directness of what is actually occurring. And sometimes things can be so difficult that we need to do that. And then there are other times when we're in so much difficulty that names won't cover it up. It's difficult. It's painful. So when we say comfortable, again, relative situation of being comfort. Someone who is just been in prison for 20 years and gets out, the contrast there is going to be pretty amazing, and they're going to be quite comfortable no matter where they're at. They would be comfortable at the mall or in their bedroom by themselves without difficulty. I was just hearing how difficult the prison was I think it was in Jackson, the Michigan's state penitentiary back in the 1800s, one of the largest in the country at the time. They had a 4.5 foot by 5.5 foot cell. You couldn't even lay down in that cell, and they put people in there for various crimes. So spending years and years in there and then coming out the contrast would be incredibly strong. So it's quite often about a contrast situation that's happening. And then there's the comfortable with nothing. There's the comfortable with you've actually when you've lost something that was precious to you or important to you, you've lost it. There's a nothing quality that's happening there. They're not here. They're gone. Someone has passed away. So there's that kind of a emptiness, and we all experience that in different forms. Even a child who loses their toy feels that empty feeling or that loss. So the Buddhist teachings talk about form, or something is empty or emptiness. So there's a technical way of talking about this as far as working with consciousness, working with realizing what is actually true, what is fundamentally true. And that kind of truth can be somewhat suggested or communicated through concepts, but it can't be realized through concepts. So people try very hard to do that. They try to think their way into realization. Probably not going to happen. Not that thought process doesn't help us a lot. We don't avoid that here. We study, as a group, we study about 8 hours a week total. I don't know how many hours of scheduled sitting meditation. Has anyone counted that up? 30-some hours? 30 hours. So that's all scheduled. So if you came here and did that practice, you'd be pretty much experiencing nothing, which for that many hours, and you'd be endeavoring probably to fill it up with something. Even something like, I don't like this nothing. That's something. I don't like sitting here and not having anything happen. So until one's self-centeredness has been at least glimpsed, and we actually see that there is a dynamic in the consciousness. In the Yogacara tradition, we call it the seventh consciousness, or the klesha mind, the mind that thinks there is somebody and is basically paranoid. Until we begin to glimpse that is actually not true, that is empty, then there will be a quality of the consciousness that will be a grasping quality, a rejecting quality. So passion, aggression, and an ignoring or shutting down or closing off quality or distracting quality. That will begin to happen. Eventually, the awareness of your Buddha nature, your wisdom mind, which is not a person, which is not an individual, that is not separate from any individual, then when the transition starts to happen, which it probably will if you work at it, seeing what is true, until that happens, there's always going to be a uncomfortable feeling about any kind of nothing, unless it's seen as a credential. Then we convert the nothing into, I must be getting somewhere, everything seems futile. That's supposed to be funny. No one's laughing. We have a bunch of existential angst going on here. So again, coming back to what I was saying initially is we're all so different. I've been teaching meditation as a way of training the mind since I was trained in 1978, and met hundreds and hundreds of students over the years, and have in the last 10, 15 years been teaching in a little bit different way than I was originally trained. But I've met so many different people, and there are so many different ways of working with this. It's just amazing to see not only some people who have trained and trained and trained and just seemed completely tied up in their self-centeredness, and yet they've done, according to what they say, been a tremendous amount of training and sitting practice and retreats, and then someone else who hasn't practiced much at all, is just beginning, seems to be just bring a tremendous amount of clarity to this right away. They seem so mature. When I say that, I don't mean age-wise. I mean just so much more reasonable about things. So we don't know for sure what that is. There's people that are not comfortable with nothing, and they want to fill it up with their ideas about it. So they do what? Speculate. Meditators, if you've begun to understand what this is, whatever fuel line runs up to the speculation department will get cut, because you'll realize that speculation is about self-centeredness and ego and wanting to know one thing from another, and want to know what's valuable, what's not valuable. This is what rules and laws and all the ethics things are about the same thing. I'm not saying they're incorrect or wrong or people shouldn't do them. But looking at the basis of something will tell you what is going on there. And quite often it is about getting something. Even someone who as I said before, has been working with this for a long time could still be filling up the very wisdom mind they're looking for with junk. When I say junk, I mean that descriptively. That's all supposed to be funny. Come on, you guys, help me with this. So when I say junk, of course it's not junk. It's their ideas about ideas about ideas. It's their opinions about an opinion that's about an opinion about an opinion. And it just gets layered. It's like plywood or something. It's just, you can't actually get to what was originally talked about because there's so many layers. And it's interesting when someone, they can be highly intelligent. When I say that, I mean very adept at handling concepts about whatever, about Buddhism or about philosophy, about the nature of the mind, about psychology, be very, very good at it and be able to move things around so fast that you get kind of confused by it, and you may even feel like, well, I guess I don't understand this as well as they do. Or you might want to challenge them and come back with the same protocol of disagreeing with this and then basing it on that, and it's quite can be quite frustrating. So what are we saying here? What am I saying here? I'm saying awareness. The space in which things occur. It's so simply put and so very, very difficult for us as human beings that are plunged into this world without asking, as far as we know, into families, situations, cultures that are completely unpredictable, uncontrollable. But we find ourselves here, and we're, as I've said so many times, we're given a name. We're taught not to hit our little brother, and and all kinds of conditioning that goes on. We're slowly enculturated into being who we are in this culture. We're not born in Nepal. We're not born in Siberia. We're here. We're in this country, which has its problems. And then all of the causes and conditions. There are so many. They're uncountable. But just to say causes and conditions is saying everything that's in motion pushing on something else. It's in the Buddhist teaching of that, one of the things that the Buddha discovered, his awakening was everything. That's a lot. Everything. That's a bunch. Everything is dependently. Everything is dependent on, well, I'll say more or less what he said. Everything is dependently arisen. So anything you find is something, whether it's a person whether it's someone's ear, whether it's a dog, a tree, a rock, is dependently arisen. It's dependent on a whole lot of other things for its apparent singularity or independence. It's dependent on it's dependent for its apparent independence on so many other apparently independent things. In our culture, in our linear way of thinking of spiritual, scientific, and psychological materialism, we want results. We want to be in control. That's why they settled for a flat earth theory until somebody come along and risk their life to say, no, it's round. Who was that guy? Was it Galileo? It was one of his buddies, I think. So we, as practitioners of the Dharma, of students of this truth, we're using concepts that have been laid out over the centuries. Everything is empty, and it doesn't mean it's not there. It means that it is, and this is a good way of practicing it with your intellect. It is empty of what you thought it was or what you think it is. So anything that's arising, we are projecting onto that something. We don't actually see things directly. If you actually saw completely directly the way the Buddha saw, all you would see would be the Buddha. You would not see sentient beings. If you did see sentient beings, you would see that sentient beings and Buddhas are not separate. That's a powerful, it's a mind-blowing kind of idea, just conceptually about it. How looking out at everything and seeing that it's not separate from you, an actual, who knows, was it perception and experience, whatever, but it certainly turned him into a different person than just the son of a king who gave up a kingdom. And perhaps what Jill is asking about is to sit and practice, which she has done many years, I think 17, 18 years of practice. Vipassana is what was her original practice. And to do that and work very, very hard at it, and then still have a feeling, what is this? How can I be comfortable with, like, I'm going to put my words to it, of no results? That is the result. But we add on to it the judgment, the separation. And who does that? That identity that thinks there is somebody. Someone who is awake, and I'm going to say this, and there are all you people out there who are awake, or people in here, you can come and correct me. But I'm going to say, someone who is awake is not going to be too concerned with pain and pleasure. I'm not saying they aren't going to say, oh my gosh, I've got a terrible back. I'm not saying they're not going to be affected by it. I'm just saying they're not going to necessarily think that the abrasive thing happening on their nerve endings is somehow is wrong or shouldn't be there. That something is wrong. I should be feeling pleasure and bliss. I've been meditating for 20 years. I should feel wonderful all the time. This is a preconception. That's eating something before you put it in your mouth. Is that like predigestion? I've heard of predigested food. Haven't you? Don't birds do that? They predigest. Here, Junior. I've already chewed it for you. So the idea here that I'm endeavoring to say is that the ego mind, is self-centered mind, is looking for some kind of result, some kind of, I'm getting this. And we all have to go through that. We all, if you're beginning any kind of a practice, you're going to have to go through some stages of frustration over not getting what you thought it would be. It could happen in any area, even in the more materialistic areas, the more mundane practices, like getting a law degree or something. It's got to be very difficult to do that. In all kinds of situations where, and then eventually your payoff, so to speak, would be your degree, and then you find out how you don't want to be an attorney. So there, it can be very, very how many people do we know? Maybe there are people here who've gotten this degree in this thing, and you're not even using it. The head monk here, has 2 degrees, and he's not actually using those to go out and be what was it you were going to be, a logger? A logarithm, a musician who is logging. Yeah. So anyway, I think this happens to quite often. I spent a lot of time when I was young I wanted to be a great artist. I wanted to be a famous artist. So I spent a lot of time working at that. And I did discover something that I'm no way I'm going to be a great artist. That's not something that's going to happen. And but it took a while. It was very painful to go through that, but it seemed to be necessary to understand what life was about for me personally. And all of you have your stories about how things changed that way, but that's very much about the contrast that we buy into one end of it and we reject the other end. And this is the nature of confusion. We buy into the pleasurable, successful part and we reject the difficult area. This is why this practice of sitting meditation is so challenging. There's so few people that really want to do, other than just a mindfulness practice of 20 minutes a day, half an hour a day, or a few times a week. And don't misunderstand, I'm not saying that's incorrect, or those people who should be meditating more. No, they shouldn't. They should be doing what they think they should do. I trust everyone. I'm not here to convert anybody to anything. If you come here and say, I think I want to do this, then you have to convince me and tell me, no, I want to live here, or I want to be a student of yours, or so that we can actually say, okay, how much of this do you want? Because I wouldn't want to, and those of you who live here, been students of mine, know that it does function that way. No one is being kind of particularly judged or pushed around. So we try to, as so far as we can, be respectful of each person's karma, meet them where they're at, and see where are they at relative to doing something like this, which has been called, and I'm calling, voluntary suffering. You're actually instead of running away from suffering and trying to get pleasure, trying to live on the beach in Sarasota, or have some kind of ideal. I don't know what that would be, because all jobs are going to be difficult in some way. But instead, you've decided to go right into the situation and see what your personal suffering is about. It's just such an intimate, personal practice, the practice of the spiritual path, or Buddha Dharma in this case. You're actually, every time you come into this zendo or into your meditation room, wherever you are, you sit down and you're looking at yourself. You're looking at your own mind coming and going. You're looking at the contrast there, something we rarely do. Usually we back away from those and we fill our mind, because we don't like that emptiness. We don't like that nothing. Because that's what it is. You sit down and you see nothing, which quite often fills up with, I don't like nothing. I don't like this. This can't be working. I don't feel good. Or I'm not getting anywhere. This is the big one. That's why it's necessary to have a teaching. Good to have an ancient teaching that goes back thousands of years, that people have tested and worked with and have interpreted, you could say, or commented on or extended. And then also to have a community of people, Sangha, that support you, that kind of agree that this is an important thing to do with our lives. Sit down and meditate, find out who we are. Realize, I'm not against the people who want to go out and protest and do all of that. We have thousands of people doing that. But we don't necessarily have to go and do that in order to prove something or to fulfill someone else's idea about how we should live our life. You need to decide yourself, if it is a decision at all. And then, of course, having a teacher is very important. And I'm not marketing myself here as a teacher. If I'm supposed to be your teacher, you won't be able to stay away from me. You won't be able to disconnect. But if you can disconnect, then probably you need to do something else. Go out and maybe another person. Maybe no teacher at all. Maybe you need to. There's a lot of people who say, well, the world is my teacher. And I would say, I'm not going to disagree, but I would just say, good luck. It's a crazy place to have where you can't find your teacher's eyeballs anywhere. And again, not disagreeing with that. I'm not saying there aren't people who can't go out and and have the world be their teacher. That's very, very possible. I think it's unlikely, but certainly is possible. I certainly couldn't have done it. I needed a couple of them. One to hit me on this side and the other one to hit me on that side. Yes?
How does having a physical teacher help?
You're a student of mine. You're sitting here breathing. You're a human being. I'm sitting here breathing. I'm a human being. I'm very old. You're very young. I practiced for longer than you've been alive. So that's kind of the first thing. And then you have to actually see if this person can respond to you in such a way that actually resonates with you. It doesn't have to be, it can be just, that word probably fits, resonate, some kind of resonating quality where you want to give that teacher the benefit of the doubt. You might not always agree, you might be even irritated with the teacher. I certainly was with mine. I know you're not irritated with me, though. Can I share something about an interview we were in? One time, Shoka came into an interview and looked at me and said, "Why do I feel aggression around you?" That's what he said. And I think I said, "I feel aggression around you too," something like that. Yeah. So we didn't resolve anything, but we met on the same ground. He came and presented himself as he was, which I didn't have the opportunity to do with my teachers. They ran away, or they had too many students, or else they split. So just a different, not better, not worse, just a different kind of situation.
A question from Sandru in New York.
Sandru.
He asks, then things aren't really things, but dependently arisen processes without beginning or end?
He's such a scientist. So, Sandru, I'm going to ask you to paraphrase what you just said. I would agree with you tentatively, but think about it for a few minutes and come back and paraphrase what you just said. Just say the same thing, only use other words. I'm looking at him. I mean, it looks like me in there. But I can see his countenance and his aura shining. Go for it, Sandru.
Next question.
He has another one?
No, this one's from Shane out in California.
Yes.
He asks, how does wisdom mind give one the answers to questions and you don't particularly understand the answer?
No, I think you've said it. You might get some kind of response coming out of that, but it might not. You might not see the whole thing. You might see part of it. It might look like it's like you're walking down a hallway and you see a tail sticking out in the hallway, and you're not sure if it's a cat or what else has a tail like a cat. Got to be something else, huh? A what? An apple? It's really strange. I think you're probably enlightened. I think it's coming down to using that silly idea there. I think it's like seeing a part of it. It's like seeing a part of it. And anytime you see a part of wisdom, it's just a part of something that seems like it's wise. It's like a saying or a slogan or something. All dharmas agree at one point, or all dharmas are without blame. So you can see the concept, and it brings you partway into it, but you don't really understand it as a deep intuition. We would call wisdom. You don't really see the incredible intimacy that we have with even the people we really, really dislike and disagree with and are upset with. There's an incredible intimacy that you begin to see with everyone, and it's how compassion arises. Compassion doesn't arise out of feeling sorry for a person who's making mistakes or hurting themselves or is suffering. It doesn't come out of it comes out of resonating with that. So you're so intimate with that person, you can see, even though that person's acting crazy, you can see because you've looked this direction so deeply that you see that is not separate. It's separated, but fundamentally it's not separate. It's called a spiritual path. And it's not, as has something to do with psychology. Of course, everything needs some kind of a ladder, some kind of structure, but the actual, if it's a mundane path, it just wants to culminate in a culmination. But the spiritual path, as my Zen master, Kobunchino Roshi, once said, when he was commenting on Trungpa Rinpoche's description, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't know exactly how it went, but something like the Vajrayana, or the tantric path, is going up a mountain, the side of a mountain with no handrails. And someone mentioned that to Kobun, and here again I paraphrase. I mean, I could be lying through my teeth because I wasn't there. But the way I heard it was that he heard that from someone else and was asked, so how does Zen fit in that? He said, Zen starts at the top of the mountain and goes up. So, but it's here again, that's another way of using concepts to point. You can't really talk like that particularly, and with unless you've understood that, unless you've glimpsed that kind of openness, or using Jill's commentary, comfortable with nothing, because in the realization in the Buddhist idea is the realization is not separate, and the emptiness is also completely full. And it's full, the way the Buddhist term for this is luminous emptiness. It is completely luminous and at the same time empty. Not two, yes?
So are you saying that our delusion is that we think we're going to receive something?
Yes, I would say that's part of it. We have a preconception that if I practice a lot, I will eventually become very peaceful, very clear, and there could be something to that. But that might be after you've gone over the top of the mountain. You might have to actually awaken before you understand what that is. And also, you might go part way, and because of your causes and conditions, because of the way you have been treated, because of, you could even mention what appears to be past life situations or previous things that seem to be showing up in this particular event we call our life. Something in there might operate in such a way that you might get more, use the conventional word, results to your practice. You know, if someone's in a lot of turmoil and they come and they sit down and hold still for a while, they're relatively speaking, they're going to feel better over time. You can't hardly avoid that. But it might not be enough to keep them practicing long enough to make the final breakthrough, which is disappointing, yes.
A response from Sandru?
Yes, Sandru.
Paraphrase. The 12 nidanas can seem like discrete things, but once we see what's happening, you can't find a start or stop.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah. Doesn't mean you're enlightened, though. Just means you're really close. But you can be really close to anything and never get there. Darn it. Yes.
A question from Gyokudo up in Minneapolis.
Well, there's quite a triangle there. That's Sandru in New York, Gyokudo, Minneapolis, and Shane in California. You guys, triangularization. Go ahead.
She asks, can you actually be aware that you are experiencing nothing?
So the initial way that shows up is loss or not enough, or some kind of maybe even a kind of a poverty mentality that, you know, there isn't anything. I'm not getting anywhere. I've been practicing all of this time, and how do I get comfortable with nothing, to use Jill's title or topic. And I would say that you can approach that, but it is approached without any kind of a success story about it. It's understood to be not separate from anything else. So there's an understanding that the very emptiness or lack of anything happening, or any entertainment, or any fruition, apparent fruition, the ground, path, and fruition of Buddhism is the ground is suffering, the path is meditation, and the fruition is to awaken or enlightenment, or see that there isn't anything that isn't Buddha nature.
A response from Sandru. Who would there be to be awake?
I'll get back to you on that.
Question from Daniel Tucker in Kalamazoo.
Yes.
He asks, can you explain the idea of the teacher as a mirror?
Yes. Just like the way the teaching person functions, if he or she is functioning out of a direct reality. And this is not a credential. The teacher may not feel like he or she is doing much at all. They might kind of feel kind of helpless around the person who's having difficulty. But because they meet the person where they're at without a credential, there's no success story here. They function as a mirror because the person who is the student is helped by the teacher to see what they need to see at that particular time. It may be kind of like a mirror image. The student may be going through certain things, and the teacher may feel that same way, because the teacher is not unclear about no separation. So therefore, there's not an ego mind where the teacher needs to function a certain way to help the person. The teacher, all they have to do is live, because the teacher is the truth, manifest as a human being. They're no longer a separate self. There's no longer actually a personality there. So you could say the teaching person, if the chemistry is working, then and the student is ready and the student is open, then an example is Shoka and I were just talking. He comes in and tells me, why do I feel aggression? And then I think I probably said something, I don't know, why do I feel aggression when I look at you? So, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen with everybody, but that was we had some humor around that. But there's a sincere quality of that he's expressing to me, and he has the courage, not a compliment, to come in and present that to me as his teacher and ask me about it. So then that mirror quality could just show up. How it shows up probably is in whatever that student needs, because of the lack of separation or hardly any separation between the teaching person and the student. That whatever the teacher can see that student so clearly because they've looked so clearly at what they thought they were, so they can see when somebody walks in front of the teacher. I experienced it with both of my teachers. You sat in front of them and you felt transparent. It was quite frightening. I'm not saying it's frightening because they were intending to do anything, and I'm saying that it's not necessary to be frightened by your teacher. You might never feel that way. I happen to be extremely wound up in myself and did not want anybody unwinding me. So that whole idea of mirror, I could spend a whole weekend seminar on that mirror quality.
One last question from Shane, and then we need to move on.
Yes.
He asks actually two questions and then a statement. Is there a pure nothing state? Seems like consciousness alternates between something and nothing. And then happy birthday, Kozan.
Happy birthday, Kozan. Thank you. Is she in there somewhere? She is. So, yes, I think she just turned 30. Somewhere in that area. So the alternation part is still delusion. If you want to read the question again,
He asks, is there a pure nothing state? Seems like consciousness alternates between something and nothing.
So here, it does seem that way, but here's the state. I'll use this. Here's a state, and here's another state. So anytime you talk about anything being a state, you're talking about relative truth. Samvriti Satya. relative situation, not the fundamental situation, or in the fancy Sanskrit Paramartha Satya, the truth that has gone beyond the relative situation without abandoning it. Nothing is abandoned. You can't abandon what you're not separate from. So as long as there's an alternation going on, or seeing that it's not two is still relative truth. I don't know why. I don't know why it's that way. I don't know why. So we need to go on to the daily Dharma gathering. Thank you.
So we'll stand and dedicate the merit together. Also, again, we'd like to remind everybody about the all day this Saturday. Please join us if you can. And once again, in the hallway are donation boxes. We have blue envelopes to donate to the teacher, and also you're welcome to donate online.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-ho-san, ji-chi-hu, shi-son, mu-sa, mo-ko-sa, the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, your great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions of the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.